In my experience, the object of the great blessings that God has given me becomes the object of the great temptations. The greatest temptations are often associated with what I would call the greatest gifts God has given me. And as I read the Old Testament storyline and I look at God's people of the past, I see the same. The greatest gifts become the focus of the greatest temptation. The great gift is the revelation of who God is. You know, you saw Decapolis trying to figure out who is God, and the idea that he's associated with nature, and so you have more than one temple in this Decapolis city because you're trying to figure out what the divine is as a consequence of what you observe in nature and can't figure out. And God says, no, let me reveal me to you, Israel. I am one. I am with you, I forgive you. You know, the same Jerusalem collage that we talked about. And yet, right there becomes the point of the greatest temptation. And it's that struggle to hold on to God as one that we see really causing the book of Judges to do this. We see it causing the northern kingdom to collapse and fall. We see it causing, remember the pagan sanctuary Solomon built on the Mount of Olives, it causes the southern kingdom to go away and fall. And so this great blessing becomes the point of the great temptation, and the question that it takes, the form of the question it takes is this: is one God enough? Is one God enough? And that's the stumbling block. That's the challenge. The Lord knew that when He gave the gift to God's people of the past, and He knew that when they came into this place, they would meet people who would have a very different answer to the question, who is God? And He knew that that would be linked to the atmospheric conditions that produced rain. So let me show you how He cautioned them. This is Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is written as Israel is getting ready to cross into promised land at Jericho. Isn't it amazing all these places now have an image in your head? So where you stayed overnight, they're getting ready to come in there. But they're on the east side yet, and the Lord says, I want to just share some things, remind you of some things, and one of the things He takes on is, I want to help you get the answer to the question, is one God enough? The land you're entering to take over is not like the land of Egypt from which you've come, where you planted your seed and irrigated it, as in a vegetable garden. In other words, the farming techniques you experienced in Egypt, which is Nile River irrigation based, is not this land, right? You've seen it. But the land you're crossing the Jordan to take possession of is a land of mountains and valleys that drinks rain from heaven. It is a land the Lord your God cares for the eyes of the Lord your God are continually on it from the beginning of the year to its end. So, if you faithfully obey the commands I'm giving you today, to love the Lord your God, only one, to love the Lord your God and to serve Him with all your heart and all your soul. Don't divide affection between me and someone else. I'm a jealous God. Then I will send rain on your land in its season. So the rain is connected to your affections for me, your identification of me as the one true God. Then I will send rain on your land in its season, both autumn and spring rains, so that you may gather in your grain, new wine, and olive oil. I will provide grass in the fields for your cattle, and you will eat and be satisfied. It is the thriving ecosystem you see out in front of you. That is the promise with the spring, winter and spring rains. And then we get the cautionary tone. Sim lave in Hebrew. Set your heart on this. My translation, be careful. Or you will be enticed to turn away and worship other gods and bow down to them. At the very point of the greatest blessing will come this temptation to answer the question negatively. God is not enough. One God is not enough. I need more. Then the Lord's anger will burn against you, and He will shut up the heavens so it will not rain, and the ground will yield no produce, and you will soon perish from the good land the Lord is giving you. And that tone is a what's the word I'm thinking of? Premonition. It is a foreshadowing of what was to come. Because when God's people of the past came into this land, and began to plant the agricultural fields, they got into a conversation with the Canaanite locals who worship many gods. And the influence was supposed to go from revealed truth to only naturally understood truth. But the naturally understood truth came back from the Canaanites who said, let us help you understand how to farm this land. The first time you get rain, November, you get your scratch plow and you open up the soil and you scatter your seed. And then you're going to get rain, our months, November, December, January, early February. And those are going to ripen, mature those crops. You see them out here. And then there'll be a flourish of rain late March, early April that will push them to ripening. Oh, there's one other thing. Oh, yes. Make sure that you're worshiping the local deity, Baal, because if you don't, it doesn't rain here. And there's no dew. Baal is in charge of rain and dew. So Israel is being confronted by an alternate answer to the question, is one God enough? Well, maybe in some places, but not here. And we've got a lot of experience here as Canaanites, and we can help you understand how to do this. Now, how in the world did they make this bridge between the worship of Baal and rainfall? It's rather ingenious. It's rather ingenious, if you can appreciate paganism as being ingenious. Because they observed what happened when it rained, and that rain changed the seed into some sort of plant. I mean, that's a dramatic shift, right? They saw the same thing happening in their livestock. When there would be mating between their livestock, there was an exchange of fluid, and you ended up with offspring. And they made the assumption that the way the rain functioned was the same way that semen functioned. It animated or gave life to the inanimate seed. And they said, well, that's as close as we come to understanding it, but we've got to attach the source to some sort of deity. And so the rain gets attached to the deity Baal, who needs to be sexually stimulated. I know I have all your attention now. That needs to be sexually stimulated so that he contributes the rainfall. And the way we sexually stimulate him is through these worship patterns we develop. Sometimes it's very, very provocative looking, if you call that, household idols that we have, fertility figurines. We have prostitution associated with our worship. And why don't you come and be part of this? The Canaanites are saying to Israel, because certainly your God might be good at some things, like getting you out of Egypt and getting you across, but what about this? Are you willing to take the chance that one God is enough when your food supply is on the line? And as philosophical and theological as we make our conversations about God, it was eminently practical in the ancient world. If we get it wrong, we don't eat, right? So we better get this one right, and Israel starts to hedge their bets. Well, maybe not. Maybe we should, expand our horizons a little bit. These guys have been here longer, and that's the book of Judges. Israel keeps flopping back into the worship of Baal, and then the Lord causes some sort of local power group to come in and displace them from the land. So what we have in Joshua as conquest becomes reversal, land loss. And then people cry out to the Lord, and the Lord raises up a judge. We've talked about this cycle before. And then the Lord provides deliverance in a time of peace. And we think, okay, one God is enough. We're finally back. And then we read not too many chapters later, and Israel once again did evil in the sight of the Lord. And that's a sign that you're diving back into Baal worship, which had its sensual side, which was attractive to them, and which had its logical side, which was attractive to them. Of course, maybe they got this right. Maybe the rainfall is what animates the soil, and maybe the rainfall does originate in this local deity. So one God is one God enough. That's the struggle.